Namaste, viewers, and welcome to Amazing Vedas with Richard Hartz. Thank you, Richard, for joining us. And in the last episode, we learned a little bit about your own fascinating, intriguing journey to Sri Aurobindo and to Pondicherry. And of course, the secret of the Veda was a trigger, as I remember, apart from essays on the Gita. And I wanted to ask you essentially about this book because I think it's a paradox that it's a book that neither the Aurobindonians, if you want to call them that, nor the people who have worked on the Vedas in the West have engaged with in the manner in which I think they ought to have. And I think it's really unfortunate because when I read this book, and I came to it later than Savitri and the Life Divine, I started with those books, Synthesis of Yoga, all the usual books. It also blew my mind, to use that expression. And I felt that this was such an important book, one of the greatest works of scholarship in the 20th century. And it's a book with so many possibilities. And it also takes you out of your parochialism, whether Indian or Western. And I think there is an inverse parochialism at play because you read all the Western work on the Vedas, including the impressive translation by Jameson and Brereton, Stephanie Jameson and Joel Brereton, published by the Oxford University Press. And, inspired by a very fine scholar, Patrick Olivelle, at the University of Texas at Austin. And yet, they don't engage with Sri Aurobindo. He's not even in the bibliography. And only Swami Dayanand Saraswati is glancingly mentioned in their work cited. And certainly the entire tradition afterwards, Siddhanjana, Kapali Shastriyar is not there, R.L. Kashyap is not there. And, I have my PhD and master's from America, and we were taught to, do our review of research. Everyone, even if you don't agree with them, has to be mentioned. And here there's a silence. They're just blacking it out, blanking it out. There's a cancel culture at play, and you see it everywhere. I mean, Wendy O'Flaherty or Wendy Johninger and all the so-called scholars of the Vedas have completely ignored Sri Aurobindo's work on the Veda. So it's intriguing why that has happened. And then the reverse of it, or the inverse of it, is the Aurobindonians themselves, you see. They say, oh, Sri Aurobindo is himself the Veda. Savitri is the new Veda. I mean, I don't want to disagree. I don't want to carp and cavil with devotees here. But my own experience has been that, reading Sri Aurobindo's Secret of the Veda has really opened up the Veda to me in a manner that was impossible beforehand. And what is also fascinating is it has also enriched my understanding of Sri Aurobindo. Everything he says, like even things he said in the future poetry about the nature of the mantra, all of that makes sense because of going back to the Veda, the overmind regions, Vak, the different levels of Vak. And I can see, I can read, or I can understand or relate to Sri Aurobindo all the better for having seen him from the perspective of the Veda, because I feel that so many of the ideas that are in Sri Aurobindo, I mean, are already in the Veda in a capsule form or in a zip file, if you will. And he never denied it, as you know. And the Shankaran fallacy of separating the Veda and the Upanishad, and the Western fallacy, Griffiths, Keith, everyone, of reading the Veda just as from a materialistic point of view, from just the physical level, and not going to the psychic, symbolic, etc. So all these fallacies that we see, all of them make sense only when you read the Secret of the Veda on the one hand, and then go back to the Veda from that perspective, then also reread Sri Aurobindo. And not only that, I don't want to talk for long, I want to come back to you, but I just wanted to share with you that, now the Odyssey is very much in the news, not only in the Christopher Nolan version, but many new versions of it are coming out. There's one with Ralph Fiennes as well. So, with, the other famous actor, there are many versions of this, but I'm saying reading the Greek classics, reading the epics, you begin to see a larger framework at play, you see, and something that Sri Aurobindo has acknowledged, that this wisdom was not confined just to the Veda. The wisdom of human beings trying to exceed themselves was some kind of a universal thing, and many other traditions were lost. So, what I'm trying to simply say is that this is a book that is a key to opening up so many things, like Joseph Campbell did. But I think Joseph Campbell's book is so much more limited and, so much more superficial. I mean, with due respect, than The Secret of the Veda. So, I want to ask you also that you're one of the. Why has this happened? Why do you think that both the West, I mean, the Western scholarship, and the great and the, I guess, the expanding circle of Aurobindonians have also not paid attention to this seminal book?
You've covered so much, I don't know where to begin, but I certainly agree with everything you've said. And it's true that in both respects, it's very disappointing to see how little attention has been given to the secret of the Veda. The situation is worse, of course, with regard to the academic scholars, but even in the circle of Sri Aurobindo's followers, it's a little bit ironic that the secret of the Veda, to the extent that it is read mostly by Sri Aurobindo's followers who are not scholars for the most part. And yet it's such an extraordinary work of scholarship. Much of the scholarship has been wasted more or less on the actual audience that it has ended up having so far. I want to actually say a little bit, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to cover it in this episode, but about the new translation, the English translation that you mentioned. First of all, it's ironic that translation of Jameson and Brereton came out in 2014, exactly 100 years after to publish The Secret of the Veda in the Arya. And during that time, Sri Aurobindo's open invitation to dialogue, which is what The Secret of the Veda is, he very modestly presents his theory as what he calls a complementary hypothesis. He doesn't intend to contradict any of the existing interpretations. He recognizes the validity of the ritualistic interpretation in its own sphere, the naturalistic interpretation of modern scholars, although modern scholars now have mostly gone back to the ritualism. But in any case, he doesn't argue with any of that, but he presents another level of meaning. And I don't quite understand why that couldn't be just acknowledged, particularly since the acknowledgement of that level of meaning goes back at least 2,500 years to Yaska. Yaska was the one who said that there are three levels,
correct,
in the Veda, the Adiyajna, sometimes called Adibhauta because it's the material ritual, the sacrifice, Yajna, sacrifice, Adidaivata, the cosmic, because the deities are, as ordinarily understood, the powers, the cosmic powers behind the forces of nature. And then finally, Adhyatma.
Correct.
Now, what's really weird is that in their introduction, Jameson and Brereton write, they have a whole section on what they call homology. After saying the truths that the poets formulated were often hidden truths, they go on to say the Vedic mental universe is structured by a web of equivalences among elements in the ritual realm, in the cosmic realm, and in the realm of the everyday. The level of the sacrifice is called the adhyajnam. The cosmic level is called adhidaivam, while the mundane is called adhyatma. But that's weird. Who understands adhyatma as mundane? Adhyatmika is the word in modern Indian languages for spiritual, if I'm not
Absolutely.
wrong. And certainly Daska didn't mean mundane. Adhibhauta means mundane in the sense of material, mundane everyday. If they would just take adhyatma in the sense in which everybody understands it, spiritual, then they would have to be recognizing the spiritual dimension in the Veda, which in any case they almost do. Of course, the word mystical is a little vague and can be used sometimes in an almost pejorative way, but still, when they write, for example, with regard to a hymn of one of the most mystical of the rishis, Vamadeva, to whom the hymns of the fourth mandala are attributed. They write in their introduction to the 55th hymn of the fourth mandala, this may be another example of the poet's reflection on the mystical nature of the sacrifice and of the transformations it effects not only in the sacrificed substance, but in the sacrificers themselves, temporarily endowing the latter with a touch of divinity. Well, that's adhyatma. It sounds to me, at least, very adhyatmika in the true sense. And elsewhere also, the fact is that you just can't read the Veda literally without recognizing these other dimensions to the meaning. There's so many passages that just don't make any sense. What they do is then they translate those passages word for word and don't try to make sense of them.
It seems so paradoxical that, they open a door and then they quickly shut it as if they're so scared that if they walk.
Yeah, I found, it is very paradoxical and ironic, and yet it's almost as if they're afraid of Sri Aurobindo. They're afraid that if this other dimension was recognized, that they would be completely out of their depth and would not know what to do with it. It's not what they're good at. They're good at, the technical details, linguistic and details of the ritual and all that. They're very good at that, and they've done an immense amount of research, which of course is all so much to the better. All of that is also part of the full meaning of the Veda. But still, there are so many passages that just don't make any sense unless they're understood as mystical symbolism. First of all, as we well know, it's in the same mandala, the fourth mandala. Sri Aurobindo often quotes the verse about ninya vachansi nivachana kavaye kavyani, the secret words that speak out their sense to the seer wisdoms or words of a kavi, however you take kavi, to the kavi. They can only be understood by another kavi. Kavi
Exactly.
is with
I mean, the Veda also talks about the fourfold vak, where she doesn't reveal herself, to except to one she wants to be intimate with, like a wife. So all those hints are there in the Veda.
One who seeing does not see, hearing does not hear. Shrunvam nashrunute. I know the verse that you're talking about. It's a beautiful one.
And there are people that they themselves have referred to, like Tatiana Elizarenkova, who have also spoken, and then other people from France and others who mentioned these symbolic levels. But one second, sorry, I've got a call. But but they don't follow up on those leads, it seems to me. So that's also very sad. But I wanted to bring it down to another level, not down or up, but you see, one is how you interpret the Veda, right? I mean, the levels and so forth. But the other thing that I found fascinating about Sri Aurobindo's methodology, as it were, if you want to call it that, is how he takes these cycles of stories, these narrative cycles. And to me, when we think about the morphology of the folk tale or many of these later works, that's why I brought in Joseph Campbell as well. But I'm saying that these cycles of stories where heroes are struggling against forces, there are human and suprahuman forces at play. This is universal. You see it in the Odyssey, you see it in the Iliad, you see it in the Aeneid. So I'm saying that Sri Aurobindo is actually opening up a door where through the stories you're going to get the deeper meaning, like, and that's where we can locate ourselves. Because I mean, when we say dharma kshetre kurukshetre, and we are in the middle of a, so to speak, battlefield, even as we speak today, it all makes sense from a Vedic point of view, because that struggle, between these forces, right? Whether you want to call them the Asuric and the Daivic, or the Dasyus or the Devas, whatever. So those forces of light and darkness, and those who want to hoard or those who want to block, whereas those who want to expand, forces of liberty versus forces of control. So I'm just saying that at that structural narrative level also, the secret of the Veda really opens up, our understanding of all great narratives of the world.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Yeah, it's a pity. I don't think Joseph Campbell or anyone else working on mythology in that way has even been aware of the secret of the Veda. It's amazing how such a brilliant work can have gone completely unknown and unrecognized for so long. At least things seem to be slowly changing in India thanks to the work. I watched the episode of Amazing Veda where or a couple of episodes where you discussed Kashyap, the work done by, R.L. Kashyap.
Sakshi and yes,
Yeah, yeah.
Jagirdar, Sakshi, and that group in
Maybe
Bangalore.
that finally is making a dent in the ignorance
We are
of.
trying, we started this seminar series. I just want to end with this episode with this note that called the Living Veda, because I mean, I wrote the theme note, and the sort of argument was the only Veda, as it were, worth whatever engaging with is the living Veda. I mean, the Veda that you live, rather than it's not just a text somewhere, it's not something outside. So how living there as a gerund is can be understood in two senses, that the Veda still lives, but you have to live the Veda, that sort of thing. But the point I'm trying to make is we did the seminar series, and again, we've seen so much resistance from, on the one hand, the traditional pundits, sometimes the Arya Samajis. So these conversations are still happening in silos, and then
Yeah,
unfortunately, as I said, that there is this current dispensation. I don't want to go into the politics of knowledge production too much, but I think they have a very flawed and skewed understanding. And I can recommend to our viewers your essay on the unfinished Renaissance. You see, I think you've got a wonderful essay.
yeah. Yeah, that was just a short piece I wrote for the students, the ex-students magazine, The Golden Chain, they call it. Yeah, but I enjoyed writing that because I felt strongly that the Renaissance in India, which is one of Sri Aurobindo's most important books, and actually it is one that's quoted and reproduced in quite a few different academic contexts. But in any case, the description of the third stage in the Renaissance is one that never happened until now.
And they are actually blocking it. This whole IKS, Indian knowledge system, which is so heavily funded, anyhow, we won't go into the geopolitics and the other knowledge production politics, but we focus on Secret of the Veda once again. And when I talk about it, just to finish this episode, the response I get is that, okay, let's make it compulsory, mandatory.
Oh
And
no.
this is how they do it.
Yeah.
Spread the word. Anyhow, so, and I said, how about freedom as a precondition for human flourishing and not coercion? So let's end on that note, at least this episode. So, viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And please check out Richard Hartz's amazing work on the incarnate word.org/Richard Hartz. We will post the link, as I said, and we will continue this conversation. Thank you, Richard, once again. Namaste, and see you soon.